Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Droning Professor. Tonight we're going to learn about why we collect things we don't need. As you make yourselves comfortable, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from, and feel free to subscribe. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. So, before we begin tonight's lesson, I need to make a confession. Last night, I was organizing my office well. Organizing is a generous term. Frantically shoving things into drawers before my spouse saw the mess is more accurate, and I discovered that I own 43 coffee mugs. 43. I am one person with one mouth and a daily coffee limit that my cardiologist has capped at 3 cups. By my calculations, I have enough mugs to go 2 weeks without washing a single one, which, let me tell you, is both horrifying and oddly liberating. But here's the thing, I'm not alone. Look around your own homes, your dorm rooms, your apartments. How many of you have a drawer full of promotional t-shirts you'll never wear? How many phone chargers from phones you no longer own? How many books you've never read but swear you'll get to someday? How many coffee mugs? Tonight we're going to explore one of humanity's most peculiar behaviors, our compulsion to collect, accumulate, and hoard things we absolutely, categorically do not need. We're going to dive into psychology, anthropology, neuroscience, and economics to understand why your grandmother has a closet full of plastic grocery bags, why you can't throw away that concert ticket from 2015, and why I apparently need enough mugs to serve coffee to a small army. Let's start at the beginning, way back when our ancestors were living in caves and trying not to become lunch for a saber-toothed tiger. Back then, collecting things actually made perfect sense. In fact, it was a survival strategy. Our prehistoric ancestors lived in environments of scarcity. Food was unpredictable. You couldn't just stroll down to the grocery store when you felt peckish. If you found a berry bush, you ate all the berries. If you killed a mammoth, you used every single part of that mammoth. You kept extra animal skins, you stockpiled tools, you saved seeds for planting. The people who hoarded resources were the ones who survived the winter. The people who didn't? Well, natural selection took care of them. This means that for hundreds of thousands of years, human brains were being shaped by an environment that rewarded acquisition and retention. Our neural circuitry literally evolved to feel good when we accumulate resources and anxious when we might lose them. The dopamine hit you get from bringing home a new purchase, that's your ancient brain screaming, yes, more resources, we won't starve this winter. Except, of course, we're not living in the Pleistocene anymore. We're living in an age of unprecedented abundance, at least for those of us in developed nations. We have climate-controlled homes, refrigerators, 24-hour supermarkets, and Amazon Prime. We don't need to hoard resources to survive the winter. But our brains? Our brains are still running software from 10,000 years ago, constantly whispering, get more, keep more, you might need it someday. This is what psychologists call an evolutionary mismatch, when behaviors that were adaptive in our ancestral environment become maladaptive in our current one. It's the same reason we crave sugar and fat, even though they're abundant and we don't need the calories. And it's why we collect things even though we're drowning in stuff. Now, you might be thinking, okay, fine, we evolved to hoard resources. But that doesn't explain why I have an emotional attachment to my collection of vintage lunchboxes. And you're right. There's more to the story, and this is where things get psychologically fascinating. There's a concept in psychology called the endowment effect, discovered by Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman. The endowment effect describes our tendency to value things more highly simply because we own them. In classic experiments, researchers would give people an object, say, a coffee mug, because apparently psychologists are as obsessed with coffee mugs as I am, and then offer to buy it back. Consistently, people demanded much more money to sell the mug than they would have been willing to pay to buy it in the first place. Why? Because the moment we take possession of something, it becomes part of our identity. It's not just a mug anymore, it's my mug. We imbue our possessions with psychological significance, They become extensions of ourselves, markers of our identity, repositories of our memories. This is why you can't throw away that ratty college sweatshirt even though it has holes in the armpits and you haven't worn it in 5 years. It's not just a sweatshirt. It's a symbol of your youth, your friendships, your experiences. It's a time machine that can transport you back to who you were when you first put it on. Getting rid of it feels like getting rid of a part of yourself. Psychologists call this psychological ownership, and it's incredibly powerful. Russell Belk, a consumer behavior researcher, argues that our possessions are literally part of our extended self. We use objects to construct and communicate our identity. Your book collection tells people you're intellectual. Your vintage record collection shows you have refined taste. Your collection of ironic t-shirts signals your sense of humor. We collect things not just to have them, but to say something about who we are. This gets even more interesting when we consider what happens after we acquire something. There's a phenomenon called the IKEA effect. Yes, named after the Swedish furniture megastore. The IKEA effect describes how we value things more highly when we've put effort into creating or assembling them. Researchers found that people who assembled their own IKEA furniture valued it more highly than identical pre-assembled furniture. The effort we invest in something, even if that effort is just cursing at incomprehensible instructions and wondering where the hell part 47B is supposed to go, makes us more attached to it. This explains why your handmade pottery from that class you took in college is taking up valuable shelf space, even though it's objectively terrible. You made it with your own hands. It's part of you. Never mind that it's lopsided and can't actually hold water. Let's get even more specific and look at what's happening in your brain when you acquire new things. Because here's a dirty little secret. Buying stuff feels good. Really good. And there's neuroscience to explain why. When you're shopping, or hunting for a deal, or bidding on an eBay auction, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite accurate. It's more precisely the anticipation and reward chemical. Dopamine is what makes you feel excited and motivated. It's what drives you to pursue goals. Here's the crucial bit. Your brain releases dopamine not when you get the thing, but when you're anticipating getting the thing. The hunt is actually more rewarding than the capture. This is why browsing online shopping sites can be so addictive, why scrolling through listings is so satisfying, why you can spend hours at a thrift store even if you don't buy anything. Studies using brain imaging have shown that when people shop, their nucleus accumbens part of the brain's reward circuit lights up like a Christmas tree. It's the same region that activates when you eat delicious food, have sex, or use addictive drugs. Shopping literally gives you a neurochemical high. But here's where it gets tricky. That dopamine rush is temporary. Once you actually purchase and possess the item, the excitement fades. The new thing becomes just another thing. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation, our tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness despite positive or negative changes in our life. You buy the new phone, it's exciting for a few days, and then it's just your phone. You need a new hit. This creates a cycle. Acquire, get a dopamine rush, adapt, need more, acquire again. It's a hedonic treadmill of consumption, and it's why your closet keeps filling up even though nothing in there makes you as happy as you thought it would when you bought it. There's also fascinating research on what happens in your brain when you consider getting rid of possessions. For some people, particularly those with hoarding tendencies, considering discarding items activates brain regions associated with pain and conflict. Literally, the thought of throwing away that old magazine creates genuine distress in the brain. The anterior cingulate cortex and insula regions involved in processing pain and negative emotions show increased activity. Your brain is treating the loss of a possession like a physical threat. Now, not all collecting is created equal. There's a spectrum of accumulation behaviors, from the reasoned and organized collector to the person who can't navigate their home because of the towers of newspapers. Let's start with what we might call normal collecting. Collecting as a hobby has a long and distinguished history. People collect stamps, coins, art, books, wine, vinyl records, vintage toys, trading cards, you name it. This kind of collecting is usually purposeful, organized, and bounded. Collectors often have deep knowledge about their collections. They can tell you about the provenance of items, their rarity, their value. There's a curatorial aspect to it. Psychologists suggest that this kind of collecting serves several psychological functions. First, it provides a sense of control and mastery. In a chaotic world, you can create a complete set of something. You can organize, categorize, and perfect your collection. It's deeply satisfying. Second, collecting can be a form of self-expression and identity construction. Your collection is unique to you. It reflects your interests, your knowledge, your aesthetic sensibility. Comic book collectors, for instance, aren't just accumulating colorful magazines. They're participating in a culture, demonstrating expertise, and connecting with a community of fellow enthusiasts. Third, collecting provides a sense of continuity with the past and future. Many collectors talk about passing their collections down to their children or donating them to museums. The collection becomes a kind of legacy, something that will outlast you. But then there's another kind of collecting that's less purposeful and more. Let's call it ambient accumulation. This is when you don't set out to collect anything in particular, but you end up with multiples of things anyway. Like my coffee mugs. I didn't decide one day, I'm going to collect coffee mugs. They just accumulated. One was a gift, one was a souvenir. One I bought because it was on sale. One I took from my office when I changed jobs. And suddenly, cabinet full of mugs. This kind of accumulation happens because we're loss-averse. Another concept from behavioral economics. Losses feel worse than equivalent, gains feel good. Getting rid of something feels like losing something, even if we never use it. So we keep things just in case. Just in case we need it someday. Just in case it becomes valuable. Just in case we regret getting rid of it. And then, at the far end of the spectrum, there's hoarding disorder. This is a recognized clinical condition, characterized by persistent difficulty discarding possessions, regardless of their actual value, resulting in cluttered living spaces that can't be used for their intended purpose. Hoarding disorder affects somewhere between 2 to 6% of the population, and it's associated with significant distress and impairment. People with hoarding disorder often have strong emotional attachments to possessions, feel intense distress when considering discarding items, and have beliefs about needing to save items. Brain imaging studies suggest that people with hoarding disorder show different patterns of brain activity when making decisions about their possessions, particularly in regions involved in decision-making and emotion regulation. It's important to note that hoarding disorder is different from collecting. Collectors curate their collections and can usually part with items if needed. People with hoarding disorder experience genuine psychological distress and impairment. It's not about laziness or being messy, it's a legitimate mental health condition that often requires professional treatment. Of course, our individual psychology doesn't exist in a vacuum. We live in a consumer culture that actively encourages, promotes, and profits from our tendency to accumulate things. Entire industries are built on understanding and exploiting our collecting impulses. Let's talk about planned obsolescence, the practice of designing products with limited lifespans so consumers will need to replace them. Your smartphone slows down after a couple of years. Your printer mysteriously stops working right after the warranty expires. Fashion trends change every season, making last year's clothes feel outdated even though they're perfectly functional. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate business strategy that emerged in the early 20th century, when manufacturers realized that if products lasted too long, people wouldn't buy new ones. The most famous example is probably the Phoebus Cartel, a group of light bulb manufacturers who agreed to limit bulb lifespans to 1,000 hours, even though they could make bulbs that lasted much longer. More broken bulbs meant more bulb sales. Tonight, we've added digital planned obsolescence, software updates that make older devices slower or incompatible, apps that require the latest operating system, streaming services that make physical media feel obsolete, even though you don't actually own anything, you're just renting access. Then there's the artificial scarcity model. Limited edition, while supplies last. Get it before it's gone. Marketers know that scarcity increases perceived value and triggers our fear of missing out. Suddenly, you don't just want the thing, you need the thing, right now, before it disappears. Collectibles markets take this to the extreme. Baseball cards, trading cards, limited edition sneakers, numbered prints, variant comic book covers, special edition Funko Pops. These exist specifically to activate our collecting impulses. They're designed to be incomplete sets, to create a sense of urgency, to make you feel like you need to get them all. And there's always another variant, another limited edition, another special release. The sneaker industry is a perfect example. Major brands release limited edition shoes in small quantities, creating massive demand. People camp out overnight, enter raffles, pay thousands of dollars on the resale market for shoes. Shoes they often never wear, keeping them in pristine condition in their original boxes. It's pure collecting behavior, engineered and monetized. Social media has supercharged this dynamic. Now, acquiring things isn't just about personal satisfaction, it's about displaying your acquisitions to your network. Unboxing videos, haul videos, collection tours, your stuff becomes content, your consumption becomes performance. And everyone else's curated displays of their possessions make you feel like you need to keep up, to acquire more, to show off your own taste and resources. The influencer economy has made this even more powerful. Influencers are essentially professional collectors and consumers, and their entire business model is built on making their followers want the things they have. The bag, the shoes, the skincare routine, the gadgets. And because these influencers feel like friends, they're in your feed every day. They speak directly to camera. They share intimate details of their lives. Their recommendations feel like genuine advice from someone who cares about you, not like advertising. Subscription boxes have tapped into this too. For a monthly fee, you get a curated box of items in your area of interest. Beauty products, snacks, books, toys, craft supplies, you name it. It's brilliant marketing. You get the dopamine hit of receiving something new every month. It feels like a gift, even though you're paying for it. And you're accumulating things you didn't specifically choose and might not need. But it feels special. It's curated. It's just for you. Let's talk about another major reason we keep things we don't need: sentimentality. Objects as vessels for memory and emotion. I mentioned earlier that we imbue our possessions with psychological significance. This is especially true for what researchers call special possessions items we keep not for their practical utility or monetary value, but for their emotional significance. The concert ticket from your first date, your grandmother's brooch, your child's first pair of baby shoes, the rock you picked up on a meaningful hike. These items are what psychologists call memory cues, tangible anchors for intangible experiences and relationships. Research in cognitive psychology has shown that physical objects can be powerful triggers for autobiographical memories. When you hold your grandmother's brooch, you might suddenly remember the sound of her voice, the smell of her perfume, the way she laughed. The object becomes a portal to the past. This is part of why getting rid of sentimental items is so difficult. It feels like we're discarding the memory itself, or disrespecting the person or experience associated with the object. It feels like a betrayal. But here's an interesting paradox. We often keep sentimental items in boxes in the attic or back of the closet, where we never look at them. We're not actually engaging with the memories, we just need to know the objects exist. The psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi studied this phenomenon and found that people often felt reassured just by knowing their special possessions were there, even if they hadn't looked at them in years. Nostalgia is a powerful force in why we collect and keep things. The word nostalgia literally means pain from an old wound. It was originally coined to describe a severe form of homesickness experienced by Swiss mercenaries in the 17th century. But today, nostalgia refers to a bittersweet longing for the past. Research has shown that nostalgia serves important psychological functions. It boosts mood, increases social connectedness, enhances self-continuity, and even makes us feel warmer, literally. People in cold rooms report more nostalgic feelings, and thinking nostalgic thoughts makes people more tolerant of cold temperatures. Objects from our past can trigger nostalgic feelings. This is why vintage toy markets are so robust, adults paying hundreds of dollars for the toys they played with as children. It's why vinyl records have made a comeback. It's why retro fashion trends cycle through every couple of decades. We're not just buying objects, we're buying access to feelings and memories from an idealized past. Marketers absolutely know this and exploit it. Reboots and remakes of beloved franchises, retro packaging designs, throwback limited editions. They're selling nostalgia, and we're buying it because it makes us feel connected to who we were, to a time when things felt simpler or better or more magical. Now, let's talk about one of the most powerful drivers of collecting, the desire for completeness. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We like order, symmetry, completeness. When we perceive a set as incomplete, it creates a kind of psychological tension. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, our tendency to remember incomplete tasks better than completed ones. Incomplete things nag at us. This is why collecting sets is so compelling. If you have 8 of the 9 limited edition commemorative coins, that missing 9th coin looms large in your mind. You don't have 8 coins, you have an incomplete set, and that incompleteness is psychologically uncomfortable. This is also why series and franchises are so powerful. Once you've read the first book in a trilogy, you feel compelled to read the other 2. Once you've watched the first season of a show, you need to watch the rest. It's not just about enjoyment, it's about reaching completion. The gaming industry has weaponized this impulse masterfully. Collectibles in video games, achievement systems, completing the Pokédex, getting all the trophies. These serve no practical purpose. They don't make you better at the game or unlock any significant content, but they tap into our deep need to complete sets, to achieve 100%, to see that satisfying collection complete message. Trading card games like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon are built entirely on this principle. Each set has hundreds of cards with varying rarity levels. Completing a set requires either enormous luck or buying many packs. And then they release a new set, and another, and another. It's an endless treadmill of incomplete collections, and people spend thousands of dollars chasing that feeling of completion. Even outside of explicit sets, we feel completion compulsion. If you have a collection of something, adding to it feels good because you're making it more complete, more comprehensive. You're moving towards some imagined state of fullness. Even if that state is never actually achievable, you can't own every book, every record, every piece of art. The pursuit itself is satisfying. Collecting isn't always a solitary activity. For many collectors, the social aspect is a huge part of the appeal. Collectors often form communities around their shared interests. Comic book collectors, vinyl enthusiasts, sneakerheads, antique collectors, baseball card traders. These aren't just people who happen to like the same things. They're communities with their own cultures, norms, knowledge systems, and social hierarchies. Being part of a collecting community provides social connection and belonging. You can share your finds, compare collections, trade items, discuss the finer points of rarity and value. You have a shared language and shared experiences. At conventions and meetups, you're surrounded by people who get it, who understand why you drove 6 hours to find that specific variant. There's also social capital in collecting. Within collector communities, having rare or valuable items confers status. Being able to identify obscure pieces, knowing the history, having connections to obtain hard-to-find items, these things make you a respected member of the community. Social media has transformed collector communities, making them more accessible and visible. Hashtags, dedicated forums, YouTube channels, Instagram accounts. Collectors can share their collections with global audiences, gain followers, become influencers themselves. Your collection becomes not just a personal source of satisfaction, but a source of social recognition and validation. The flip side is that this social dimension can fuel competitive collecting. If everyone else in your community is showing off their latest acquisitions, you feel pressure to acquire more too. It becomes an arms race of accumulation. And since social media tends to show everyone else's highlights, it's easy to feel like your collection is inadequate in comparison. Many collectors justify their acquisitions by framing them as investments. This will be worth something someday. This is going to be a collectible. I'm not spending money, I'm investing. Sometimes this is actually true. Some collectibles do appreciate in value. Comic books that cost 10 cents in the 1930s sell for millions today. Rare coins, stamps, art, vintage cars, first edition books, there are genuine investment-grade collectibles. But here's the thing. For every item that appreciates, there are thousands that don't. The vast majority of things marketed as collectibles never become valuable. Those limited edition plates, those commemorative coins from the Franklin Mint, those Beanie Babies you bought in the 90s? Sorry, but they're basically worthless. The problem is that actual collectability is unpredictable. Things become valuable because of a confluence of factors: genuine scarcity, lasting cultural significance, condition, provenance, and the sustained interest of collectors. You can't manufacture this just by stamping limited edition on something. In fact, as soon as something is marketed as a collectible, it's less likely to become valuable, because everyone bought it as a collectible. Everyone saved it in pristine condition. Everyone thought it would be valuable someday, so there's no actual scarcity. Contrast this with genuinely valuable vintage items, which are rare precisely because people used them, played with them, threw them away. Economists call this the greater fool theory. The idea that you can make money buying something overpriced as long as there's a greater fool willing to pay even more. Speculative bubbles and collectibles follow this pattern. Prices rise as long as people believe they'll rise, but eventually the music stops and you're stuck with a bunch of stuff no one wants. But even when collections don't appreciate in value, collectors often inflate their worth in their minds. Remember the endowment effect? People consistently overvalue their own possessions. Add in the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to continue investing in something because you've already invested so much, and you get people convinced their collections are valuable when objectively they're not. Storage costs, insurance, the opportunity cost of the money you spent. When you factor in all of this, most collections are net financial losses. But as long as you never sell, you never have to confront that reality. Schrodinger's collection, simultaneously valuable and worthless until you try to sell it. So far, we've mostly talked about physical collecting, but we live in an increasingly digital world, and interestingly, our collecting impulses have seamlessly transferred to the digital realm. Consider your digital music library, your ebook collection, your saved posts, your bookmarked articles you'll definitely read someday, your screenshot graveyard, your downloaded PDFs, your Steam library full of games you've never played. Digital collecting has some unique characteristics. First, there's virtually no physical constraint. You can accumulate essentially unlimited digital items without running out of space. Well, until you run out of storage, but storage is cheap and expandable. This removes one of the natural limits on physical collecting. Second, digital items don't degrade. Your ebooks won't yellow or deteriorate. Your digital photos won't fade. In theory, digital items last forever, which encourages keeping everything. Why delete anything when storage is cheap and you might want it someday? Third, digital collecting is often passive and automatic. Your streaming history is automatically saved. Your photos are automatically backed up. Your browsing data is collected without you thinking about it. You're accumulating a digital archive of your life without actively trying to. But here's the paradox. Despite accumulating enormous digital collections, we often have trouble accessing or organizing them. Your music library has 10,000 songs, but you listen to the same 50. Your photo roll has 20,000 pictures, but you never scroll back past last month. Your saved articles number in the hundreds, but you never read them. We're data hoarders, accumulating information and media at unprecedented rates. But unlike physical collectors who curate and organize, we often just accumulate. It's ambient digital hoarding, facilitated by automation and the low cost of storage. Then there's a new frontier, collecting things that don't even exist in any traditional sense. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are essentially digital certificates of ownership for digital items. People have spent millions of dollars buying NFTs of digital art, tweets, video clips, and even just JPEGs of cartoon apes. When NFTs first exploded in popularity, skeptics asked, why would anyone pay for a digital image that anyone can copy? But collectors understood. They weren't buying the image itself, but the certified blockchain-recorded ownership of the original. It's like owning the original painting versus owning a poster of the painting. Except the original is also just pixels on a screen that anyone can view. This might seem absurd, but it's actually perfectly consistent with collecting psychology. Remember, collecting has always been as much about ownership, status, and identity as it is about the objects themselves. NFTs just make this explicit. You're buying status and bragging rights, wrapped in a digital certificate. We've covered a lot of ground about why collecting happens, but we should address something more serious when collecting crosses the line into problematic behavior. We already mentioned hoarding disorder, but there are other ways collecting can become harmful. Financial problems are common among collectors. People going into debt to fund their collections, hiding purchases from partners, prioritizing collecting over necessities like rent or healthcare. There's also the environmental impact. Our culture of consumption and collection is ecologically devastating. The resources required to manufacture all this stuff, the energy for shipping, the waste when we eventually discard things. Fast fashion alone generates enormous amounts of textile waste. Electronic waste, old phones, computers, gadgets contains toxic materials and is rarely properly recycled. Every item we buy and collect has an environmental footprint. The dopamine hit from acquiring something new has real costs that we rarely consider in the moment. We're collecting ourselves into ecological catastrophe. There's also a psychological cost. The clutter stress is real. Studies have shown that cluttered environments increase cortisol levels and decrease well-being. The mental load of managing, organizing, and making decisions about all your stuff is exhausting. Marie Kondo became a cultural phenomenon not because she invented tidying, but because people are drowning in their possessions and desperate for relief. Relationships can suffer too. Partnerships often have conflicts about stuff. One person's treasured collection is the other person's clutter. Differing attitudes toward possessions can be a genuine source of relationship strain. And there's the opportunity cost. The time spent shopping, organizing, maintaining collections is time not spent on relationships, experiences, creativity, rest. The money spent on accumulating things is money not spent on experiences, education, helping others, or financial security. I'm not suggesting that all collecting is bad, or that we should all become minimalists, but it's worth being honest about the costs and examining our relationship with our stuff. So, what do we do with all this information? How do we navigate our collecting impulses in a world designed to exploit them? First, awareness is powerful. Understanding why you want something can help you make more intentional choices. Are you buying this because you genuinely need or will use it, or because marketing has triggered your scarcity fear? Are you keeping this because it brings you joy, or because throwing it away feels uncomfortable? One strategy is to implement waiting periods. Before buying something, wait 24 hours or a week. If you still want it after the waiting period, it might be a more considered purchase rather than an impulse. Often, the urgent desire fades, and you realize you didn't actually need it. The one-in, one-out rule can help limit accumulation. When you acquire something new, you must let go of something old. This creates a natural cap on your possessions and forces you to be more selective. For sentimental items, consider taking photos instead of keeping the physical object. You preserve the memory without the clutter, or keep a small representative sample rather than everything. Do you really need to keep every piece of your child's artwork, or would a carefully curated selection capture the memories just as well? Question: the completion compulsion. Do you actually need to complete the set? What would happen if you just didn't? The discomfort of incompleteness fades faster than you'd think. Unsubscribe from marketing emails. Unfollow accounts that make you feel like you need more stuff. Curate your media consumption to reduce exposure to consumption messages. Consider experiences over possessions. Research consistently shows that experiences bring more lasting happiness than material goods. Travel, concerts, meals with friends, classes, adventures. These create memories without creating clutter. For those struggling with hoarding or compulsive collecting, professional help is available. Cognitive behavioral therapy has shown effectiveness in treating hoarding disorder. There's no shame in seeking help if your relationship with possessions is causing distress or impairment. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a bigger question. What do we actually need? Throughout human history, philosophers have grappled with questions of material sufficiency. The ancient Stoics advocated for living with less, focusing on what's essential. Buddhist philosophy teaches non-attachment to material things. Thoreau went to Walden Pond to live deliberately and simply. The challenge is that need is both objective and subjective. Objectively, we need food, water, shelter, safety. Everything else is technically optional. But subjectively, we need meaning, connection, identity, beauty. And objects can serve these needs, even if they're not necessary for biological survival. Your book collection might be excessive from a minimalist perspective, but if those books bring you genuine joy, if they're a source of learning and growth, if they're a meaningful expression of who you are, then maybe they're not excess. They're serving an important psychological need. The question isn't whether we should never collect anything. It's about being intentional, about understanding our impulses and making conscious choices, about distinguishing between what genuinely enriches our lives and what we're accumulating out of habit, compulsion, or marketing manipulation. It's about asking, does this add to my life or just to my pile of stuff? Am I collecting this or is it collecting me? As I look around my office at my 43 coffee mugs, I realize I'm not going to get rid of most of them anytime soon. Some have good memories attached, some were gifts, some I just like. But now I understand why they're there, and why the idea of getting rid of them creates that little twinge of anxiety. We're all navigating the space between our evolved impulses, our psychological needs, our social contexts, and the marketing machines that want us to buy more. It's not easy. We're running ancient software in a modern world, trying to use objects to meet needs they can't really fulfill. But awareness is the first step. Understanding why we collect things we don't need helps us make more conscious choices about what we acquire, what we keep, and what we're willing to let go. Maybe I don't need 43 coffee mugs, but I need to understand why I have them. And that understanding is worth more than another mug, which I saw on sale last week and almost bought. Old habits die hard. Thank you for your attention tonight. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Droning Professor. Tonight we're going to learn about database normalization. So, as you settle in, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from, and feel free to subscribe. As we begin, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. Oh, and don't bother grabbing some coffee or energy drink. No judgment here, because it won't help, since this topic is a real snoozer. Now, prepare yourself for a journey through one of the most elegantly structured topics in computer science. Yes, I said elegant. I promise by the end of this lecture, you'll understand why. And that's designing databases. Why should you care about database design? Let me start with a confession. I once built a database where I stored customer addresses in a single text field. 123 Main St., Apt 4B, Springfield, Illinois 62701, all crammed together like sardines in a can. Know what happened when the marketing department wanted to send targeted mail to everyone in Illinois? Chaos. Pure, unadulterated chaos. That, my friends, is why we're here today. Database design isn't just some theoretical exercise dreamed up by academics with too much time on their hands. It's the difference between a system that hums along beautifully and one that makes grown developers weep into their keyboards at 3 a.m. According to C.J. Date, a pioneer in relational database theory, whose 2003 textbook, An Introduction to Database Systems, is considered foundational in the field. Proper database design is fundamental to data integrity, system performance, and maintainability. But let's be honest, Date probably didn't have to deal with a panicked marketing director breathing down his neck either. Part 1. Understanding database design fundamentals. What is a database really? At its core, a database is an organized collection of structured information or data, typically stored electronically in a computer system. Thomas Connolly and Carolyn Begg define this clearly in their 2014 textbook, Database Systems, a practical approach to design, implementation, and management. Think of it as a digital filing cabinet, except instead of folders and papers, we have tables, rows, and columns. But here's where it gets interesting. Unlike my actual filing cabinet, which currently contains 3 years of tax documents, 2 dead batteries, and a takeout menu from a restaurant that closed in 2019, a database is supposed to be organized. The relational model, a love story. In 1970, a gentleman named Edgar F. Codd published a paper titled A Relational Model of Data for Large Shared Data Banks while working at IBM. This paper, published in Communications of the ACM, changed everything. Codd proposed that data could be organized into relations, tables, where each relation contains tuples, rows with attributes, columns. Before Codd, databases were hierarchical or network-based, which meant navigating data was like trying to find your way out of an IKEA, technically possible, but emotionally draining. The relational model said, hey, what if we just organize things in tables and let you ask for what you want? Revolutionary stuff. The beauty of the relational model lies in its simplicity and mathematical foundation. Each table represents an entity, like customer, order, or product, and relationships between entities are expressed through shared attributes, typically using keys. This is covered extensively in El-Masri and Navathe's 2015 textbook, Fundamentals of Database Systems, now in its 7th edition. Entities and relationships. The building blocks. An entity is anything about which we want to store information. Students, courses, professors, parking tickets, pizza orders if you can think it. It can be an entity. An entity has attributes, characteristics that describe it. A student entity might have attributes like student ID, first name, last name, email, date of birth, favorite color of socks that match their aura. Okay, maybe not that last one. Relationships describe how entities interact. Students enroll in courses. Professors teach courses. Students avoid professors during office hours. Just kidding, please come to office hours, they're lonely times. These relationships can be one-to-one. Each student has one student ID card. One-to-many. One professor teaches many courses, poor soul. Many-to-many. Many students enroll in many courses. Peter Chen, who developed the entity relationship model in his seminal 1976 paper, The Entity Relationship Model Toward a Unified View of Data, published in ACM Transactions on Database Systems, showed us that properly identifying entities and their relationships is crucial for creating an effective database schema. The ER diagram has become the standard tool for visualizing database structure, despite looking like something between a flowchart and modern art. Part 2. The Keys to the Kingdom. Primary Keys. Your table's social security number. A primary key is a unique identifier for each record in a table. It's like a social security number, except databases actually use them correctly. Rules for primary keys as outlined in Cornell and Morris's 2016 textbook, Database Systems, Design, implementation, and management. Must be unique for each record. Cannot contain NUL values. More on NUL later. It's philosophically complex. Should be immutable, changing it is like trying to change your birthday messy. Should be simple, preferably a single column. Bad primary key choices. Email addresses, people change them. Phone numbers, people change them. Names, not unique, and also people change them. I'm looking at you, Witness Protection Program. Good primary key choices. Auto-incrementing integers, UUIDs, universally unique identifiers. Composite keys when necessary, multiple columns that together form uniqueness. Foreign keys, building bridges between tables. If primary keys are social security numbers, foreign keys are references to someone else's social security number. They create relationships between tables. Imagine we have two tables. Students table, student ID, primary key. First name, last name. Enrollments table, enrollment ID, primary key. Student ID, foreign key. Course code, grade. The student ID in the enrollments table is a foreign key that references the student ID in the students table. This is how we know which student earned that D+ in database design. Please tell me it wasn't you. Foreign keys enforce referential integrity. You can't enroll a student who doesn't exist. Ramakrishnan and Gerke discuss this extensively in their 2002 book, Database Management Systems. The database acts as a bouncer. Student ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't see you on the list. You're not getting into this enrollment. Candidate keys and alternate keys, the runner-ups. Sometimes a table has multiple attributes, or combinations of attributes, that could serve as a primary key. These are called candidate keys. The one you choose becomes the primary key. The ones you don't choose? Those are alternate keys, like the runners-up in a beauty pageant, perfectly qualified but not wearing the crown. For example, in an employee table, both employee ID and email might be unique. You pick employee ID as the primary key, and email becomes an alternate key. Part 3. The dark side: what goes wrong without good design. Anomalies. When data behaves badly. Poor database design leads to 3 types of anomalies, first identified by Codd in his original 1970 paper. 1. Insertion anomalies. You can't add data without having other data. Imagine a table that stores both courses and instructors in a single table. You can't add a new course until you've assigned an instructor. What if you don't know who's teaching it yet? Tough luck, buckaroo. 2. Deletion anomalies. You delete one piece of information and accidentally delete other information too. In that same poorly designed course instructor table, if you delete the last course taught by Professor Smith, you lose all information about Professor Smith entirely. Professor Smith has been erased from existence. Thanos would be proud. 3. Update anomalies. You need to change the same information in multiple places. If Professor Smith's office number is stored in every row where she teaches a course, and she moves offices, you need to update dozens of rows. Miss one? Congratulations, Professor Smith now exists in a quantum superposition of offices. Data redundancy, the copy-paste disease. Data redundancy means storing the same information in multiple places. It's like having 5 copies of your house key seems safe until you need to change the locks. As Date emphasized in his work, redundancy causes wasted storage space. Okay, storage is cheap now, but still, inconsistencies when updates aren't applied everywhere. Increased maintenance burden. Your DBA quietly sobbing in the server room. Part 4. Normalization, the solution to all problems. Well, most problems. What is normalization? Normalization is the process of organizing data to minimize redundancy and dependency by dividing large tables into smaller, related tables. El Masri and Navathe provide comprehensive coverage of this process in their textbook. Think of it like organizing your closet. You wouldn't store all your clothes in one giant pile, I hope. You separate shirts from pants, organize by color or season, and store each item where it makes sense. Normalization does the same thing with data. The process follows a series of normal forms, each building on the previous one. It's like leveling up in a video game, except the final boss is your own confusion about what constitutes a transitive dependency. The normal forms, a journey through increasing abstraction. First, normal form, 1 NF, atomicity achieved. A table is in first normal form if all attributes contain only atomic, indivisible values. Each attribute contains only a single value from its domain. Each row is unique. All entries in a column are of the same data type. Bad example. Not in first normal form. Student ID, student name, phone numbers. The phone numbers contains multiple values. This violates first normal form. It's also terrible for queries. How do you search for a specific phone number? For good normal form, or first normal form, each cell contains exactly one value. Yes, we're repeating John Doe's name, but we'll fix that in higher normal forms. Patience, young Padawan. William Kent's 1983 paper, A Simple Guide to 5 Normal Forms in Relational Database Theory, published in Communications of the ACM, emphasizes that achieving first normal form is the foundation for all further normalization. Without atomic values, your database is basically just a fancy spreadsheet with delusions of grandeur. Second normal form, eliminating partial dependencies. A table is in second normal form if it's in first normal form. All non-key attributes are fully functionally dependent on the entire primary key. This matters when you have a composite primary key, multiple columns forming the primary key. Here, the primary key is student ID, course ID. But student name depends only on student ID, not the full composite key. That's a partial dependency. It's partially dependent on the key rather than fully dependent. Good example. Second normal form, compliant. Students table, student ID, student name. Courses table, course ID, course name. Enrollments table, student ID, course ID, grade. Now each table's non-key attributes depend on the entire primary key. Beautiful. Third normal form, transitive dependencies be gone. A table is in third normal form if it's in second normal form. No non-key attribute is transitively dependent on the primary key. A transitive dependency occurs when A to B and B to C, therefore A, C. It's like that game of telephone where the original message gets distorted. Bad example. Not in third normal form. Here, student ID to major and major to department head, therefore student ID to department head. That's a transitive dependency. If Dr. Smith retires and Dr. Brown becomes the CS department head, we need to update every CS student's row. Update anomaly alert. Good example, third normal form, compliant. Students table, student ID, student name, major. Departments table, major, department head. Now if a department head changes, we update one row. One single row. This is living the dream, folks. According to Date's extensive work on database theory, third normal form is sufficient for most practical database applications. Anything beyond this is typically reserved for specific scenarios or when you want to impress people at parties. Spoiler, it won't work. Boyce Codd normal form. Third normal form's stricter sibling. Boyce Codd normal form is a slightly stronger version of third normal form. A table is in Boyce Codd normal form if it's in third normal form. For every functional dependency, A to B, must be a superkey. A superkey is a set of attributes that uniquely identifies a row. It's like a primary key but might include extra attributes. A primary key is a minimal superkey. The difference between third normal form and Boyce Codd normal form is subtle and only matters in specific cases involving overlapping candidate keys. Most database designers work primarily with third normal form, and Boyce Codd normal form becomes relevant when you're dealing with complex scenarios. Example, where third normal form does not equal Boyce Codd normal form. Imagine a table tracking which textbooks professors use for courses. Professor course textbook. Rules. Each course has exactly one textbook. Each professor teaches only one course. Multiple professors can teach the same course. Candidate keys, professor course, and professor textbook. The functional dependency course textbook violates Boyce-Codd normal form because course alone isn't a superkey. To fix this, we'd split into separate tables. Fourth normal form and fifth normal form, the deep end. Fourth normal form addresses multi-valued dependencies, and fifth normal form deals with join dependencies. Ronald Fagan introduced these concepts in his 1977 and 1979 papers on advanced normal forms. These are advanced topics that most developers will never encounter in practice. Think of them as the PhD-level material of database design, important for theoretical completeness, but like quantum physics, most people don't need them for everyday life. If you're designing a database for NASA or a large banking system, sure, explore them. If you're building a web app for tracking your book collection, third normal form will serve you just fine. Part 5. Denormalization. Sometimes rules are made to be broken. The performance paradox. Here's a dirty secret. Sometimes, over-normalized databases can be slow. Coronel and Morris discuss this practical reality in their textbook. When data is spread across many tables, retrieving it requires join operations. Joins can be expensive, especially across many tables or with large data sets. It's like asking someone for directions to their house, and they give you a treasure map that requires 3 buses, a train, and a short hike. Denormalization is the intentional introduction of redundancy to improve query performance. It's like keeping a spare key at your neighbor's house instead of always having to drive back home when you lock yourself out. When to denormalize? Consider denormalization when read performance is critical and writes are rare. You're frequently joining many tables. Analytical queries are slow. Your DBA is threatening to quit. Common denormalization techniques. Adding redundant columns. Store calculated values instead of computing them. Creating summary tables. Pre-aggregate data for reporting. Combining tables. Reduce join operations. Using materialized views. Cache complex query results. The trade-offs. Denormalization isn't free. Nothing in life is, except maybe samples at Costco. Advantages: faster read queries, simplified queries, fewer joins, reduced computational overhead. Disadvantages: data redundancy returns, risk of inconsistency, more complex update logic, increased storage requirements. Ramakrishnan and Gerke note that the decision to denormalize should be based on careful analysis of access patterns and performance requirements. In other words, measure first, denormalize second, panic third. Just kidding about that last one. Part 6. Practical database design process. Step 1. Requirements analysis. Before you touch a database tool, understand what you're building. Talk to stakeholders, users, and anyone who'll listen. Document. What entities exist? What information needs to be tracked? What questions need to be answered? What are the access patterns? This is like measuring twice and cutting once, except with more meetings and less sawdust. Step 2. Conceptual design, ER modeling. Create an entity relationship diagram. Identify entities, the things in your system. Attributes, properties of those things. Relationships, how things connect. Cardinality, how many of each thing relates to the other. Tools like Lucidchart, Draw, I/O, or even paper and pencil work fine. The goal is understanding, not perfection. Step 3. Logical design, normalization. Convert your ER model into tables and apply normalization rules. Identify candidate keys. Achieve 1 NF atomic values. Achieve 2 NF. Eliminate partial dependencies. Achieve 3 NF. Eliminate transitive dependencies. Check for Boyce-Codd normal form if dealing with complex keys. Document your functional dependencies. Write them out. Yes, actually write them. Trust me. Step 4. Physical design. Now consider the actual database implementation. Choose data types carefully. Define indexes for frequently queried columns. Consider partitioning for large tables. Plan for backups and disaster recovery. Think about security and access control. This is where theory meets reality, and reality often has opinions about your elegant design. Step 5. Implementation. So if you're still awake, this should help, because I'm going to read some SQL code to you now. This should sound awesome. Create the database using SQL Data Definition Language, DDL. SQL create table students. Student ID int primary key auto increment. First name varchar 50, not null. Last name varchar 50 not null. Email varchar 100 unique not null. Date of birth date. Create table courses. 1. Course ID varchar 10 primary key. Course name varchar 100 not null. Credits int not null. Create table enrollments. Enrollment ID int primary key auto increment. Student ID int not null. Course ID varchar not null. Enrollment date not null. Grade char 2. Foreign key. Student ID. References. Student ID. Foreign key. Course ID. References courses ID. Unique key. Unique enrollment. Student ID. Course ID. Step 6. Testing and refinement. Load test data. Run queries. Check for performance bottlenecks, missing indexes, incorrect relationships, constraint violations, fix problems, repeat. Welcome to the iterative nature of software development, where the first version is never the final version. Part 7. Advanced Concepts and Best Practices. Null. The billion-dollar mistake. Tony Hoare, who invented the null reference in 1965, later called it his billion-dollar mistake in his 2009 presentation at QCon London. In databases, null means unknown or not applicable, but it behaves weirdly. Null is not equal to anything, including itself. Null equals null evaluates to null, not true. Null equals null evaluates to null, not true. This causes confusion in queries, comparisons, and aggregations. Best practices. Use not null constraints wherever possible. Provide default values when appropriate. Be explicit about null handling in queries. Document when null is acceptable and what it means. Indexing. The secret to performance. An index is a data structure that improves query speed at the cost of write performance and storage. As Connolly and Belk explain, it's like the index in the back of a textbook. You can find topics quickly without reading every page. Types of indexes. B-tree indexes. Default for most databases. Good for range queries. Hash indexes. Fast for equality comparisons. Full text indexes. Optimized for text search. Spatial indexes. For geographic data. Index wisely. Index foreign keys. Index columns used in where clauses frequently. Index columns used in join conditions. Don't over-index. Each index slows writes. Transactions and ACID properties. A transaction is a sequence of operations performed as a single logical unit. Jim Gray introduced the ACID properties concept in his 1981 paper, The Transaction Concept, Virtues and Limitations. It must satisfy these properties. Atomicity. All or nothing, either the entire transaction succeeds or none of it does. Consistency. The database moves from one valid state to another valid state. Isolation. Concurrent transactions don't interfere with each other. Durability. Once committed, changes are permanent. These properties ensure data integrity even when multiple users access the database simultaneously or when systems crash at inconvenient times, which is always. Naming conventions. Make your future self happy. Consistent naming makes databases maintainable. Table names. Use Pascal case students or snake case student courses. Be descriptive but concise. Use plural for tables. Students, not student. Column names. Use camel case or snake case consistently. Avoid reserved words. Include units in names. Price USD, weight kg. Keys. Primary keys. Table name ID, for example, student ID. Foreign keys. Match the referenced primary key name. Document everything. Your successor will either bless you or curse you. Choose wisely. Part 8. Common pitfalls and how to avoid them. Pitfall 1. Using natural keys instead of surrogate keys. Natural keys are meaningful attributes. Social security, number, email. Surrogate keys are artificial identifiers, auto-incrementing IDs. Problem with natural keys: they can change. People change emails. Social security numbers can be reassigned rarely. Even VIN numbers have been reused illegally. But still. Solution: use surrogate keys as primary keys and create unique constraints on natural keys if needed. Pitfall 2. Not planning for growth. Today's table with 1,000 rows might have 100 million rows in 2 years. Design with scalability in mind. Choose appropriate data types. Don't use big int for everything, but don't use tiny int for user IDs. Consider partitioning strategies early. Plan for archiving old data. Think about read replicas and sharding. Pitfall 3. Over-engineering. Not every database needs to be normalized to 5NF. Not every table needs 47 indexes. Sometimes simple is better, as Coronel and Morris remind us. Build for today's requirements with an eye toward tomorrow's needs, not for hypothetical scenarios that may never materialize. You're building a database, not the Death Star, which, let's be honest, had terrible database design. How many exhaust port vulnerabilities do you need? Pitfall 4. Ignoring database constraints. Use constraints to enforce business rules. Not null. This column must have a value. Unique. No duplicates allowed. Check. Value must meet specific conditions. Foreign key. Referential integrity. Default. Provide default values. Constraints prevent bad data at the database level. Don't rely solely on application code. Applications have bugs, get upgraded, or get replaced. The database is the last line of defense. Pitfall 5. Poor error handling. Database errors happen. Networks fail, disks fill up, users enter Robert, drop table students. As their name, yes, this is a real attack called SQL injection. Handle errors gracefully. Use transactions appropriately. Implement retry logic for transient failures. Log errors comprehensively. Never expose raw database errors to users. Part 9. Modern considerations. Know SQL and when to break the rules. Not every problem needs a relational database. Martin Fowler's 2012 book, NoSQL Distilled, a brief guide to the emerging world of polyglot persistence, provides excellent guidance on this. NoSQL databases like MongoDB, Cassandra, and Redis excel at highly flexible schemas, horizontal scaling, high throughput writes, distributed systems, but they sacrifice some ACID guarantees and the rich query capabilities of SQL. Choose based on your specific requirements, not trends. Cloud databases and managed services. Cloud providers like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud offer managed database services that handle automatic backups, scaling, patching, high availability. This shifts the burden from database administration to database design. You can focus on schema design rather than server maintenance. It's like having a chauffeur instead of being a mechanic. Data warehousing and analytics. OLTP. Online transaction processing databases are optimized for many small, fast transactions. OLAP. Online analytical processing. Databases are optimized for complex queries across large datasets. Data warehouses use different design patterns, as explained in detail by Ralph Kimball and Margie Ross in their 2013 book, The Data Warehouse Toolkit. Star schema. Fact tables surrounded by dimension tables. Snowflake schema. Normalized version of star schema. Denormalized structures. optimized for read-heavy analytical queries. These intentionally violate normalization principles for performance. Conclusion: the art and science of database design. Database design is part science, part art, and part fortune-telling. You're making decisions today that will impact systems for years, sometimes decades. Good database design, as emphasized by Date, El-Masri, Navathi, and other experts in the field, minimizes redundancy through normalization, maintains data integrity through constraints, balances theoretical purity with practical performance, adapts to changing requirements, remains maintainable over time. Remember the principles we've covered. Understand your data and relationships. Normalize to eliminate anomalies. Use keys appropriately. Apply constraints liberally. Index strategically. Denormalize judiciously when needed. Document everything. Test thoroughly. Most importantly, recognize that database design is an iterative process. Your first design won't be perfect. That's okay. Learn from mistakes, refactor when necessary, and always keep data integrity as your North Star. As Codd demonstrated in 1970, proper data organization isn't just about efficiency. It's about creating systems that accurately model reality and remain reliable over time. In an age where data drives decisions, businesses, and increasingly our daily lives, good database design isn't just important, it's essential. Now go forth and design databases that would make Edgar Codd proud, or at least databases that won't make your DBA cry. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you.